Welcome to the inUpowers podcast, where we give a name and a face to emotion. We discuss the real and raw when it comes to mental and emotional health. We are here to teach you that emotions are information and behavior is a choice. We want to help you make safer connections through healthy communication by empowering you to understand what your emotions are telling you. I'm your host, Tami and Dallas. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to another week of the inUpowers podcast. I'm Tami and your host, and today we have with us
Dallas Johnson.
He is a psychologist, and he's actually helped us build the inUpowers program, and we're super excited for him to be on the podcast and for you to hear from his words, because he's a brilliant man, and we've been so grateful to have his influence and help through the program. But today, for our Moments Minute, we would like to talk about post-traumatic growth. Not PTSD, but post-traumatic growth. In fact, this was a conversation we were having right before the podcast. So, Dallas, or Dr. Johnson, how would you like to be responded?
Dallas works perfect.
Can you explain PTSD and post-traumatic growth to everyone?
So, PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, just the name itself, you can hear that some psychologists, some important people have been involved in saying, hey, somebody's got a disorder, and defined it in a certain way. And it does accurately capture a lot of people's experiences after they've had some sort of trauma. About 1 in 5 people after a serious trauma will start to develop symptoms that start to get in the way of their life. And we could call this
1 in 5?
Usually about 20% of folks after, depending on the type of trauma.
Wow.
Yeah, they'll develop this PTSD, this kind of conglomeration of symptoms that start to impact their life and the way they live, getting in the way of their life, really.
Right.
So. And
we actually, in the inUpowers program, we call the storms in the ways. And our trauma character's name is Sue, Severe Unraveling Event. She's a tsunami, and she changes your landscape forever. And when a tsunami hits, it takes a team to rebuild. Sometimes a doctor's enough, but other times 20% might need help from a psychologist because it starts to change the patterns of their life. Mm-hmm. And we call them the in the ways, but we also created an in the way barrier. And the in the way barrier represents when you're stuck in your storm. Mm-hmm. And
we would say PTSD.
That's a technical term. I call it in the way barrier. Yeah. And with the imagery we have, it's a mirror, it's a wall that's really heavy, and it's got a reflective, it says in the way, and it reflects you and your past. Right. But it's blocking you from your future. Is that what PTSD can do?
Absolutely. Is it okay to talk a little bit about some of my history?
Please.
So I spent several years at the VA hospital in Salt Lake City working with the folks with PTSD from Vietnam, from different Gulf Wars, Afghanistan. And this is exactly what PTSD does. These in the ways, they'll have these really highly traumatic negative experiences, and their minds, their brains just continue to reflect on that, and in an effort to protect them from future traumatic events, it starts creating defenses for them, literally blocking their path over more and more and more and more things, and their life gets smaller and smaller and smaller till they're not living so well. So this is the post-traumatic stress that when it's hit and it's really taking effect, and that barrier would absolutely be that PTSD.
Wow. And it's because they're doing it to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. But they're focused on themselves and their past.
Right.
How do you break free from that in the way barrier?
That's a great question.
The $1 million question.
It depends,
right?
But there's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of really good ways. I like the way in your program you've talked about you've changed the name from in the way to the way. And that's actually what we know happens. If you think about mothers who have lost children to drunk drivers, well, probably everybody has heard about Mothers Against Drunk Driving too. The way that these mothers get through this very traumatic experience is by coming together and trying to create awareness and protection for others. So in other words, they make meaning of this horrible thing that happened to them. in and of itself, there's no meaning to losing a child. It just hurts. It's devastating. But when they can take that energy and that pain, now they have the way. They have Mothers Against Drunk Driving. If it's a veteran who's been to war and they've had these horrible experiences, it's doing something similar, finding a way to take the past, make meaning of it, even if they have to invent that meaning. Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Or Wounded Warriors Project.
Wounded Warriors, beautiful.
And there's lots of VA projects, and there's the veterans with disabilities who they make homes and they build homes, or they go and they speak and they teach children that you can live with a disability, and they find purpose in their problem. And so in the Way program, or in our inUpowers program, when you get up to the In the Way barrier, you're stuck. But when you have found the power to take your in the way storm and move it out of the way, it now guards the way. And it turns gold. It is not easy to take a storm or some emotion that's been super hard or super hurtful and to just move on.
Right.
And I think a lot of people try to do that.
It's painful to reflect on the terrible thing. The memories are real. The event really did happen. It's hard to just move past, and it makes a lot of sense. People don't always consciously do this, but trying to do anything to just get away from that pain makes a lot of sense, and it also actually creates a barrier.
So suppressing emotion and refusing to address it, to just avoid it, actually gets you stuck in a smaller box.
Smaller and smaller, because the brain doesn't stop there. It just keeps going and say, well, that hurt too, and that hurt too. And so the life just keeps getting smaller.
Wow. So then it really takes a lot of work to get out of that. And that's when your trauma continues to traumatize you. And then you're really, truly stuck, and it takes an army to help you rebuild the landscape you want, just like after a severe unraveling event. So when the Mothers Against Drunk Driving or the veterans with PTSD, when they are in post-traumatic growth, what does that look like? And how do you know you got to that place?
Great question. So, one, it's growth, so it's movement. It's not a place to arrive. It's a new way of being. It's using that in the way, turning it to the way. It's now a new path, a new way of approaching. Because you say before, like, Sue changes the landscape forever.
Right.
It really is. It doesn't mean that landscape has to be awful. It can be even more beautiful.
Right, because you can pick what you want. You might not have liked that tree there, but now the tree's gone.
Yeah. There we go. I didn't even have to bring in the arbor.
Right.
That's great.
So it's not necessarily, it's not an event. It's continuing on the path. It's growth.
It's finding that meaning, making meaning as you're traveling along with all the memories, all the experiences, but now they're a help to move forward rather than a blockage.
Well, and I think a lot of times, like the principle of a muscle, right? It's resistance. You have to carry the weight, whatever you have to do, and then it's tear, soar, and then stronger. And I think a lot of times that resistance can be so suffocating that when we're tear and soar, we surrender instead of become stronger. And that's when that in the way can really keep you stuck. But if you understand it's a principle of a muscle, then that traumatic event no longer holds you back, it builds you. Right.
And your analogy, the muscle, because as a psychologist, I'm very interested in the brain and the actual different parts of the brain. There's this connective tissue between the frontal lobes, what we think of as the conscious part of yourselves.
Okay.
And then the limbic system, the non-conscious kind of survival protective part of the brain. There's this connective tissue part of it is the anterior cingulate. And this connective tissue plays a large role in how we respond to our environment. So if PTSD has kind of set in, this anterior cingulate gets smaller and smaller. The neurons, the connective tissue starts to get smaller and smaller, meaning the conscious self has less and less ability to manage strong emotions. But when people are engaged in things that will help turn the post-traumatic stress into growth, Now we're actually firing between the conscious self, you would call it the you,
Uh-huh.
right? The conscious self and the limbic system. And that actually then begins to grow, like similar to a muscle. As it fires, it wires more in a more pronounced way. And what we see is people who had severe PTSD in that anterior cingulate was so atrophied that after they've gone through various processes to re-engage with their conscious self, now this anterior cingulate is robust and larger and more connective tissues. They now have much more ability to respond in the way that they would like to their environment. So,
Wow. That's how come when I've met the survivors, and the survivors when they've used our program, they're trying to connect back to their conscious self.
mm-hmm.
That makes so much sense. Just so you know, I know
Yeah.
that we can make ourselves smarter, but I didn't know I could like grow the muscles in my brain, not the muscles, the connective tissue
Yeah.
in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And we should be doing this.
It's a very healthy practice to be more conscious as we live our lives, for sure. It's much more enjoyable.
Right. So what are some tools or skill sets we could do without having PTSD? I don't recommend any of you going out there and creating PTSD for yourselves. Post-traumatic growth we do want to work on, but what are ways to help that tissue and the subconscious and the conscious start working together?
Actually, I think this is one of the ways, because I didn't invent inUpowers. I simply looked at it after the fact, after you brought it to me. It's like, wow, this really fits with what we understand of how to create a whole person. And what it's doing really well is helping people to become very conscious of these non-conscious processes. And that's the key. Becoming very conscious of non-conscious processes is what creates that beautiful communication between that survival part of our brain, the limbic system, and our conscious self. And the more communication it has, it's like a relationship in a way. It builds. So as we're looking at the various characters in the inUpowers, both the ones we like and the ones we don't always like so much, like either way we're becoming conscious, we're having interactions with them, we realize they are there, we can have a relationship with them. That turns out to be very effective in increasing that. So almost any time someone engages with a character and starts to realize, oh, this is a lot like this part of me, then
I'm having a what about me moment.
Perfect.
And I'm recognizing that the storm, this emotion is giving me information.
Right.
That I might be broken or hungry. Normally when I'm having a what about me moment, I'm hangry. And I'm just really hungry. But but that information, when you recognize it,
right,
and you're able to label it, it starts doing more in our brain than we even know.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. And so to recognize, and do you think a lot of us go around the world kind of numb?
I think it's super easy to get numb. We're not faced with most of us. There are definitely people that might be watching this that actually do experience it. Most of us know there's going to be a roof over our heads, that we're going to have food on the table. We're not living to physically survive. What we're facing is lots of emotional dangers. And emotional dangers, anytime there's a chance of not connecting with the people we want to connect with, right? That's a real threat to us, and it's painful, but getting in survival mode, punching people in the face and running away from them just doesn't fix that. What we need in this case is connection. And so, but our brains tend to handle pain as pain. It doesn't matter if it's coming from not connecting with someone or someone hitting their toe with a hammer. It's the same neural circuitry. The body tends to go into that fight or flight. And if I'm feeling helpless, I'm going to go numb. I'm going to check out, become less conscious. So then I don't have to deal with it. And I'm
don't
not
have
conscious.
to feel.
Yeah, because feelings hurt. They're supposed to. If I'm not feeling connected, I'm actually designed to hurt. I'm supposed to.
So if we're not connecting, because we talk about this a ton in the inUpowers program,
Right.
that we need to be making healthy connections and making, healthy communication and safe connections.
Right.
And communication is done with person to person and not person to artificial intelligence.
It's not going to work.
Thank you. I watch it and I see it, but it's true. We need each other. And we don't want to hurt, but our brain can't tell the difference between stubbing our toe or somebody rejecting us.
Can't do it. Not the limbic system. The survival part is going to respond as if we need to deal with this physical threat.
Wow. And that's how come, as a society too, we've gotten a little bit more reactive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning so much right now. So by being conscious and by trying to recognize what our feelings are telling us and being courageous enough to maybe be rejected
Mm-hmm.
will actually strengthen our brain.
Yes, significantly.
And that's post-traumatic growth.
Absolutely. And of course, if I have experienced that trauma and I am withdrawn, this is not easy. I'm sitting there talking about how useful. It's very terrifying that the feelings associated with trauma, when someone's re-experiencing the bad thing that really did happen to them, but now they're experiencing it as if it's happening again, and then telling them it's okay, you're safe. Sometimes a hard sell to the brain to say, oh yeah, we're fine. Don't worry about that impending doom that is flooding your body right now.
That sounds terrible. I'm so glad you do your job.
I love my job because actually the reason I love my job is post-traumatic growth. Like, it is so rewarding to see how resilient we are when we do connect with how beautiful the parts of ourselves are. They're not there to harm us. They are there to try and help us. But without us being conscious, they can't do their job in the best way possible.
So there you have it. We need to be courageous enough to be connected to ourselves and to be connected with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds so simple. You're giggling. You're like, it's not.
Like, neurologically, it's not. There's a lot of complexity to it. But actually, again, one of the things I like about you is you've created these very complex systems that happen in the brain and the body, the neurochemistry, that, and you've given them characters. You've given them a life, a way to experience and make connection with something that is pretty complex. There's trillions of connections in the brain, but you've given a way for people to name it. And once we've named something, it goes a long way to helping us tame that very thing. So that's where the name it to tame it comes from. But now, I can put a name, I can put a character to that part of me. It's much easier to connect with myself now because I'm not so scared of it. And I also might be able to not be so scared of other people because I can recognize, oh, they're having a storm like I do. They're not so different from me. Maybe I don't need to be so scared of them. I don't like their behavior, but I can see where their behavior is coming from. I don't need to be so scared of them.
And that is so profound. I've spent my life loving people. I love people. And I started in the beauty industry because I love people, because I could help watch them evolve, grow in the chair, basically. Mm-hmm. I could do all the 5 love languages, and I could do their hair, and I could make them feel good. But I was enamored by the fact that we all have eyes here, and a nose, and a mouth, and a face, and skin, and hair. And we're all completely different, yet we're exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And the more I saw how the same we were, the more in love I fell with our human family. And when you're saying, when you recognize the storms in someone else, it makes it easier for you to connect and to not be so threatened mm-hmm. by the storms of life.
Yeah, because now I'm familiar with, I get why they're probably feeling that way. It's hard to be as afraid of someone. I might still need to protect myself. Your Ann Shield has it. What is the 3 words?
It's acknowledge, navigate, and dedicate.
Okay.
It's I acknowledge that you're having a storm,
mm-hmm.
and now I have to decide, can I live with it, leave it, or change it?
Thank you. Those live, leave, or change, like that very empowering process. I may need to protect myself from someone's behavior. I don't have to hate them in order to do that. I can because I'm now more conscious, I can make it a very good, healthy decision to create a boundary, a distance from that person. Because the moment I start hating somebody, I'm designed to experience pain anytime I hate or I'm angry at someone. I will feel pain. So if I can move away from that and now just healthily create that boundary, I don't have to experience the pain. I can instead experience that appropriate sadness, that appropriate loss.
So if you choose hate, your body feels pain?
You can't not feel pain. We're designed to connect.
Holy cow, I did not know that. So I'm going to say it again. This is blowing my mind, and I hope you guys are listening. If you choose hate, you have purposely designed pain for yourself in your life. Wow. And what happens if you choose love?
Quite the opposite. As long as it truly is love, conscious love.
Okay,
not
teach
desperate
me that.
love.
Yes, they're different.
Yeah.
So teach me conscious love. What does that mean?
So conscious love would be more like your inUpowers are talking about, really recognizing people's behavior for what it is, their own fears, their own storms, their own history coming into play, affecting them. I may need to protect myself physically and emotionally from them, but I don't have to dislike them as a person. And so true love is, some people would say, to understand them is to love them. So having a way to understand what they're going through, why they're going through it, now I can love them even if I need to do it from a distance. I don't have to resent them, because if I resent them, I'm creating that pain in my brain again, versus I can love them from a distance and take more responsibility for my own boundaries, my own space, and not leave it to them because they're not capable of it.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is from Elizabeth Smart, and forgiveness is giving up the hope of a better past.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to rewrite the past, just not expecting it to be different, so you don't hang on to the resentment and the hate
Right.
for the hurt that you experienced. That is profound. I did not know that hate creates pain.
Mm-hmm.
And genuine love and acceptance creates healthy, it grows your brain. I'm probably saying it wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry, psychologist. You can do it the right way, but it makes you stronger.
Absolutely.
Wow.
We think of the least afraid people on the planet, and they're the people who have the ability to really love people at their core, to really do that. Because now any emotional response they're getting from people, it's from a very conscious place, that we could probably look at their anterior cingulates, which I would love to do, and see.
What's anterior cingulate?
That's the part of the brain,
Tissue?
that connective tissue I was talking about earlier, and that's robust. A person is able to fully engage conscious awareness of other people and of their own self and make healthy decisions around them.
That's incredible. I will keep working on, say the word again.
Anterior cingulate cortex, you don't need to remember it. Sometimes I literally will call it the hope muscle. It's the part of the brain that allows us to actually engage in hope for
Wow.
the future.
It's our hope muscle. I will call it that from now on. I'm going to engage my hope muscle. And we are going to ask you to engage your hope muscle and recognize that you don't have to have PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. You can have post-traumatic growth. And if you are carrying hate, you are encouraging yourself to have pain. It's inevitable. And if you work on your hope muscle in your brain, you can make healthy, conscious decisions. Wow, Dallas, this has been incredible. Thank you. I've learned so much.
Well, thanks you for having me here.
Is there anything you would like to tell everyone about the inUpowers or about your practice or about the world right now that you want them to know?
No, I'm lucky. I don't need to be here to drum up any business. I get to just be here because I've really appreciated being exposed to inUpowers and how well they fit with our understanding of psychology. I get to work with college students on a college campus in a counseling center, and so I get to see how a lot of the world's happenings are actually influencing and affecting the college student population. And a lot of them are terrified of each other, like just that pain, the disconnection they're experiencing, the fear of not knowing what's going on inside themselves, a lot from COVID where everybody was trapped and separated. And so I think the inUpowers are a great way for people to help reconnect with themselves and better understand their neighbor.
Which is something we all can do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, until next week, and thank you again, Dallas Johnson. I'm Tami Hymas, and remember, emotions are information and behavior is a choice. See you next week. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the inUpowers podcast. We are grateful you are here. Please share this podcast with those you know who might need it, and follow and rate us so we can continue providing this podcast to you. Follow us on social media to see more visuals about the inUpowers, and join us next week for another episode. Until then, remember, the power to choose is in you.